The internet changed how we work. AI is changing what work gets done. A bank cut loan processing from days to hours. A student built an AI scheduler, improving on-time delivery from under 70% to over 90%. Most teams know AI matters, but aren't sure where to start. InAI is Indiana's statewide AI adoption effort, built with industry, academia, and community partners, helping you move from understanding to action. Visit inaiready.com.
How do you talk about your hometown? You have to talk about your place with reverence and pride.
A young ambassador for the state of Indiana, Nate Spangle, is on a mission to show off the values and virtues of all things Hoosier.
Is the White River what everyone thinks it is, or is it the most misunderstood natural wonder of Indiana?
Whether he's canoeing 84 miles on the White River or singing the praises of small-town Indiana, and what happens when young talent and old vets row in the same direction.
Now there's a really cool country music festival that has 4,500 attendees in a town of 3,000 people in Brownstown, Indiana, all because young people got a seat at the table and the more seasoned parts of the community helped out and did their part to come together to build something special.
Rock the Rind in Brownstown, one of the many places Nate Spangle has showcased on his popular Get In podcast. Meet this young gun from Bourbon, Indiana, shining the spotlight on Indiana on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. And I'm really pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by Nate Spangle. Nate is the creator, the host of the Get In podcast. And if you don't get the Get In podcast, you're one of the few people in the state of Indiana that does it, because Nate, you've got a great following. You've got a great podcast. You get around the state of Indiana. So I feel fortunate we've been able to corner you for a few minutes here because you're a busy guy.
Oh, I am honored. I'm here with Indiana Hoosier royalty, getting on the you had to break down barriers and run through the state of Indiana for me to get to do what I get to do. So I am honored to be here and chit-chatting with you today.
Excited to talk to you, Nate, because this is truth speaking here. I'm really impressed by what you do. You get around, you get everywhere. And you talk about get in, you get everywhere. You've talked to so many people around the state. First of all, give folks an idea, who is Nate Spangle?
Yeah, I am from a small town in northern Indiana called Bourbon, up in Marshall County, 1,500 people, a stoplight, a pizza place, and obviously a hometown dive bar. And then from there, I went to DePaul University out in Greencastle. So everyone says, oh, if you're from Indy, you're like, oh, Greencastle's a small town. And for me, Greencastle is 12,000 people in a Walmart. I was like, this is metropolitan living, baby. Let's go. I say that one all the time. I love it. And then after 4 years there, I joined the Orr Fellowship and came to town. So I did 2 years at a company here called Apex Benefits, was in the health insurance space. It was awesome. I had a great time there. And then I joined a startup for 3 years called Powder Keg, where we were working in the tech space here in Indianapolis and got into podcasting through that. We had started a show. We had put out a bunch of episodes. I mean, Gary, see, you really started this whole media in Indiana thing, but I feel like today everybody has a podcast and no one listens to anyone's podcast. It's so competitive to grow a podcast. And so we had put out 50 episodes. We hadn't really got that early traction. Sponsorship dollars were drying up and we were trying to figure it out. And that's where I went on this quest. It was literally craziness. I put out a video one day walking into work saying, I'm on a mission to be the first truck in the infield at the Indianapolis 500, and I'm going to host the first ever all Indiana tailgate. So breweries, like bakeries, butcher shops, breakfast, everything had to be sourced from Indiana. I wouldn't go to Walmart or Kroger or anything. It had to be locally grown, locally owned. It was a heck of an experience. The only thing was I didn't own a truck. So I had to go buy a truck off Facebook Marketplace. I documented the process of fixing up this 1986 Dodge pickup truck. We found a squirrel living in the dash. We had to go around. We were serving Java House coffee and Upland and Moontown and Sun King beer, 4 Day Ray. It was awesome. I held the title for 2 years. I was the first truck through the North 40 gate. So everyone has probably seen that old iconic shot from the news where those cars are playing bumper cars trying to get through
Yeah.
the North
Hey,
40
Nate,
gate.
and that
Yeah.
you know who that was. I used to work for Channel 6. Before I started the show, I worked for Channel 6. And that was Channel 6. That was Cy Jenkins and Tom Sisler, I believe, was a photographer in the it was the craziest video
Yeah.
and so representative of how it used to really be at the track.
Yeah, I'd seen that video and I'd heard the story of Larry Basiglia. And Larry was like this legend who I think for 37 years in a row was the first truck in the infield. And I was like, let's bring this back to life. Mr. First in Line. I documented the process. In 6 weeks, I gained 15,000 followers.
Wow.
And I got almost 1 million views on the content that I put out. And I made 10 grand. And I was like, 10 grand from sponsors? I was like, I'm rich. Quit
Yeah.
my job the next week, and the rest of it's history.
Wow. So that from that one event, that's really what spawned it. So it gave you the confidence, it gave you the again, the confidence to say, hey, I can do this.
Well, the cash flow for a 26-year-old, living here in Indiana, it's not 10 grand gets you pretty far. So I was like, let's just go and see how far we can make it. And luckily, we're still kicking here 2 years later. So from there, I ended up getting the ownership rights to the podcast. And it was very business and entrepreneurship focused. And I really wanted to broaden that. I wanted to make it nonprofit leaders and athletes and just people that are interesting. So literally the first episode that we've produced on our own was there's a man from the Kokomo area that ran the perimeter of the United States of America. He started in Cleveland, ran to Maine, down to Key West, over to San Diego, up to Washington and back over. He did it in 240 something days, self-supported with a little like cart that he pulled around. He is like a legitimate modern day Forrest Gump.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Give folks an idea of the Get In podcast, because you have transformed and built this platform from kind of that one-off deal at the Speedway to something where you are literally hitting every corner of the state, talking with everything from CEOs to people who run around the United States to you name it. How would you characterize the content that you're putting out on a daily and weekly basis?
Yeah. So it's all I would say positive storytelling, uplifting stories of the state of Indiana. We from newsletters. So we have a newsletter that covers the entire state. We have a newsletter that covers the South Bend market, a newsletter that covers Fishers. We have my podcast. We have Get In Sports with Don Miranda, another DePaul alumni, where he covers pro, college, D1, D2, D3, NAIA, down to high school sports, just based in Indiana. Last year in 2025, we generated 83 million views on content focused on Indiana. And for me, we put out 3 podcasts a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I've had guests like Pato Award, and I've had guests like Allison Langdon, and I've had Scott Dorsey, and really interesting figures within the Indiana landscape. But then I also do more of like the social media style videos where, oh my gosh, one day I ate nothing but tenderloins, like I breakfast, lunch, dinner, midnight stack, 4 tenderloins in a day. It was like, and documented the process. Silly idea. No one needs 4 tenderloins in a day. But I also most recently canoed 84 miles from Muncie to Indianapolis down the White River over 5 days before the recent events with the floods and everything.
Yeah. You've really become an advocate for the state of Indiana in many ways. Where does that... Is that a business thing? You found a niche and you're pursuing it business wise, or is there a love for the state, a passion for the state that kind of drives you?
I think it comes from small town roots and then going to like a small private school. Like I grew up in there wasn't a lot to do in Bourbon, Indiana. Again, it's 1,500 people. So you had to be creative. And I just became driven by impact. Like I wanted to be the best football player, the best wrestler possible, but I also was like, I did plays and other different things, and I wanted to make an impact in my community. And I knew that if we wanted to build cool things as high schoolers in Bourbon, Indiana, you just had to go out there and figure it out.
Yeah.
And along the journey, it's just been a lot of figuring it out. Going to DePaul, it's like not a lot of people are going to tell you no if you bring crazy ideas, but they're not going to do the work for you. And then coming to Indianapolis and being part of Orr Fellowship, at every stage of my kind of journey, I didn't get a lot of no's, like, no, you shouldn't do that. No, that's silly. Don't do that thing. it was a lot of people supporting and willing to help if you're willing to do the work. And I just became, I don't know, just obsessed literally with making an impact. And I don't know, I feel like over time you find out what you're good at. Like, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not a lot of things, but what I am good at is bringing positivity and energy into places, and figuring out how to do that through social media and do that through modern media has been my way of making an impact. Because I just get frustrated when I hear Indiana's boring, there's nothing to do here, all the people are, whatever they think they are. It's like, if you think that Indiana is not a great place, you haven't asked the right questions. If you go out there and talk to the people from the biggest cities to the smallest towns, like I'll go literally anywhere and I'll talk to the people, and I learned that people that live in Indianapolis and work in the Salesforce Tower aren't that different from people that live in, New Amsterdam, Indiana, the smallest town, 14 people. Like, they're not that different. They all are Hoosiers. They all have Hoosier blood, and it's just been a really, really fun journey to try to make my little slice of impact in Indiana.
Yeah. What has surprised? Has anything surprised you as you've gotten out and experienced Indiana, again, every corner of the state of Indiana? What you just said, I think, is so true. And I think, part of it is Hoosiers, Midwesterners, we don't brag. We don't, typically are kind of close to the vest, don't talk much about ourselves. But there are some really cool things going on here in the state of Indiana, and not just in Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, but in the small town Indiana as well. Has anything surprised you in your travels?
Well, I'll say the first thing is you're completely right. Hoosiers are so humble, it's almost a detriment. And obviously we love that. That's what makes Indiana special. But it's like if you were the tech founder of a multi-$100 million company, if you lived in LA, you'd go on Instagram and a selfie and say, I'm so great, look at me. And like if you did that in Indiana, we'd look at you like you had an eye growing out the center of your forehead. But when they come on the show and I get to talk with them and almost be their unofficial hype man, it's authentic and it's real. And it's not you bragging about yourself. It's, hey, let me brag about you. Like, you're doing great things. Your story is inspiring. Like, it's super fun. So what I've learned from the travels, oh my gosh, like some of the stories of different places and communities and how they're so intertwined with history and how they are today. So you take like Du Bois County, the Jasper, Huntingburg, Ferdinand area, like they have like a lineage of German entrepreneurship. So you think about the landscape of the state of Indiana, the eastern portion of the state really got into automotive manufacturing. So like when times got tough in the automotive industry, they packed up, they left town, and those communities were left to figure out what to do. Versus like the German entrepreneurship heritage of that like southwestern portion of the state, they like built homegrown entrepreneurs. And you talk about Jasper Engines and some of the big furniture companies that are down there. And it's like, it's not lucky. It's like, that's the heritage of the people that settled that area. You go up to the region and you talk to people that are from the old school, like the steel manufacturers, and like why they're like a gritty kind of, just like they have their own specific culture in the region in Northwest Indiana. It's super fascinating. One of the most fascinating stats that I learned, okay, so the region, Northwest Indiana, Lake County, Porter County, half of LaPorte County, that little slice up there, there's so many different communities and towns. It's crazy. You have the Maryville, Portage, you have all those places. But on county population, so Marion County is number one, Fort Wayne is the second biggest city, but Lake County is the second most population density. They're number two in population density up there. So if they were all one big city, it would be the number two biggest. And I just didn't understand until I actually went up there. And it's like hard to tell where Hammond stops and Whiting begins. But they all have pride in their little communities, and there's all heritage and legacy there. And it's super cool.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Nate, to me is, and what you're saying is exactly right. There are so many entities, municipalities, towns, cities up there, and it's over time, it's been very competitive. Everybody wanted their own slice of the pie, and it kind of served to their detriment. But now the region is starting to come together for the first time, I think, in a long time. You got the South Shore extension and the big project with that, a big focus on technology and innovation. Maybe even the Bears going to be.
That's like the cherry on top that we're waiting for. But it's so cool because that's the pride that the Whiting Oilers, like that's their high school mascot. One of the things that I did that helped me gain popularity was I memorized every high school mascot in Indiana. And like when I was studying, I was laser. Like I knew every single one. Today, I probably walk around knowing 80% of them. But
Nice.
you walk into a community and they're like, "Where are you from?" They're like, "I'm from Whiting," and I say, "Go Oilers." And it just like you make that connection and you learn about them. Everyone is proud of their small town. Everyone should be proud of their small town. And so then you go to Northeast Du Bois, home of the Fighting Jeeps, and like they're really proud. And you go down to Tell City, home of the Marksmen, and they're proud of their place. And there's amazing stories that happen throughout Indiana. And the number one thing that I'm trying to combat is you walk into Chicago and someone asks you, "Oh, where are you from?" The typical response is someone like lowers their head and goes, "I'm just from Indiana." And it's like, no, you're not just from Indiana. You're from a place where makers and doers and these incredible Hoosiers are always doing something big. They're just not in the spotlight. They just don't put themselves center stage and make it all about them. They just put their head down and do the work. And that's what fires me up about the work that I get to do, the work that you get to do, and that the whole staff at the IBJ and the Indy Star, and like that's what storytelling. I'm not a journalist, I'm a storyteller. And it's all about telling compelling stories to make people excited and proud of where they come from.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Nate. And, I think that's been one of the big challenges for Indiana over time, still is that we don't, as a state, tell our story. And, it is a great story to tell. And I think we're at a point where Midwestern states, Indiana, a great example, stand to benefit from this focus that less of a focus on the coast and some of those other places that big companies are saying, hey, we can come to the Midwest with a great work ethic, great quality of life, and all the cost of living, all those kinds of things. And I think we're positioned to do some really great things.
Yeah. And like telling the story to people, potential, what from economic development to people moving into the state. And it's like, you're not stepping back to the 1920s here,
Right.
like we there's Teslas and Cybertrucks that run around Indianapolis. We're not using steam engines to get places. I think that people think it's like Pioneer Village everywhere you go, and it's just not quite the truth.
Yeah. So you went to DePauw. You didn't go to DePauw thinking you were going to be a podcaster. What did you
Yeah.
major in, or what did you think you wanted to do when you went to DePauw?
Yeah, so I was a communication major. I did that because I couldn't pass calculus. Like I walked in the first day, they said a bunch of words that I didn't understand. I called my parents and said, "Hey, the econ route was fun, but I'm going to go be a comms guy," because I knew I wanted to be involved with small business. I didn't even know the word entrepreneurship at the time, but I knew that I wanted to be in small business and I wanted to make an impact. And if worse came to worse, I'm a talker and like I would get into sales. I'm a
Yep.
competitive individual. Put me on a sales team and we'll do something. So that came when I got introduced to the Orr Fellowship and I learned about what entrepreneurship was. And I heard these crazy stories of the Scott Dorsey and the Angie Hicks and Bill Osterley and these just prolific Indiana entrepreneurs that built amazing businesses. And I was hooked. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to build transformational things for the state of Indiana.
You are an example of what I think the Orr Fellowship is all about. That's what you just said right there. But I don't think a lot of people know about the Orr Fellowship. I think it's one of the great things that's been around now for a while. I think they've expanded from Indianapolis down to Evansville and maybe are going to go some other places too. But talk about the Orr Fellowship
Yeah.
and what that meant for you.
Yeah. I'm not quiet when I say that the Orr Fellowship changed my life, truthfully. I'm from a small town in northern Indiana. I don't believe I knew anyone that worked on a computer full time as their job. Like no software developers, like maybe an accountant. That was the goal. It was like you move back home and you go work in a factory or you work in the office of the factory. And getting to go to DePauw and then join the Orr Fellowship and hear about all these different careers where there was software and media and podcast, like all of these crazy cool things for a small town kid from like northern Indiana. It was just an awesome experience where I got plugged into a network. And what I say about it time and time again is I like milked every single ounce of value I could get out of the Orr Fellowship. I would call everyone. I would message them on LinkedIn, send emails. Hey, would you meet with me? I have no idea what I want to do with my life, but what you do looks super interesting. Would you give me 5 minutes? Would you give me 15 minutes? And I literally remember one year I had like 75 different coffees with Orr Fellowship alumni. like virtual. It was right as around COVID started, so it was all virtual where
Yeah.
people wanted to talk anyway. And I mean, I talked to financial advisors in Evansville and tech founders in Indianapolis and people in the movie industry in Denver because the Orr Fellowship Alumni Network is heavily concentrated here in Indy, but there's a Chicago presence, a Nashville presence, there's West Coast, East Coast. People do grow up and end up moving different places. And I love the fact that the majority of people, it does seem like they stay in Indiana and they build cool things here. And we do such a great job. We have however many tier one or what is it, top tier R1 research institutions or whatever that thing is. And like we do a great job of educating people. And I feel like the Orr Fellowship, Eli Lilly does a good job. The ADP program at Roche, like there's a few of these programs that have really been intentional about keeping young talent here, helping them develop in Indiana, getting them plugged into leadership opportunities so that they can be as excited about making a change here as I am.
Yep. Much more ahead with Nate Spangle, the creator, the host of the Get In podcast. We'll talk about some of his unique and interesting interviews around the state, life as an entrepreneur, and maybe what's next as well when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
As a bank, PNC prides itself on being boring. But the truth is they couldn't be more excited to serve the dynamic Indianapolis community. For nearly 160 years, they've quietly toiled away to deliver brilliant results for their equally brilliant clients. They have dedicated PNC teams throughout the local area all ready to do the boring work to help you unlock your own brilliance. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. PNC Bank, National Association member FDIC.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America builds and maintains roads, bridges, and other essential infrastructure that make us the crossroads of America. So thanks to LIUNA members' work, Hoosiers have a better quality of life, like access to utilities, easier routes to jobs, schools, or medical care, and deliveries keep moving. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Nate Spangle. Nate is the host, the creator of the Get In podcast, a extremely popular podcast that really focuses on all things Indiana, especially all things positive Indiana, every corner of the state. And Nate, I don't know, you may not have a count on this. How many interviews, any idea on how many episodes or how many interviews you've done? Because every time I get on social media, you're interviewing someone new.
I believe we just crossed episode 330 something, I believe. So we put out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sometimes, Indy 500 week, we dropped like interviews with 5 different Indy 500 driver or IndyCar drivers. But yeah, we're at just over 330, I believe. What
in all those interviews, and people ask me this sometimes, I can't, you do so many interviews, it's hard to, kind of select the favorite one or the most unique one. But as you think about all the different, are there any themes that go through interviewing, whether it's CEOs or other people that you find?
I think the common theme, Indiana is so different from the Denvers of the world, the coastal places of the world. In Denver, there is this mindset. You walk outside, you look up in the sky, you see this giant mountain, and you know that that's what you're supposed to do, right? On the coast, you're in Florida. You walk outside, you smell the salt, you know that, oh, there's a beach over there, like that's what I'm supposed to do. In Indiana, it's not as easy, I'll say it, to know like what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to get plugged in. The natural resource that is the most abundant and that I've gotten in almost every single podcast, the people are truthfully different here. I've had people that are not from Indiana, that have been born in other countries, born in other places, have somehow found their way to Indiana, and time again, people who are people persons, I guess is how I want to say that, they thrive in Indiana. People who want to make an impact, like that's the natural resource here. And time again, from the most successful entrepreneurs to the change makers and the athletes and the nonprofit leaders, they all say that the people are special. And that's what Hoosiers should lean into more.
Nate, in terms of talent, because that continues to be brain drain, a big issue for the state of Indiana, keeping talent, but also attracting talent here, especially young professionals. In your view, what's missing?
So Two things. The first one, really what's missing is it's this challenge. I'm not going to say necessarily it's missing, but the first problem to address with that is the way we talk about our home. So again, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. Like, you walk into Chicago, you walk into Nashville, you walk into New York, you walk in wherever you might be going. When people ask you where you're from, how do you talk about home? I think before capital projects, before any of these, before spending money on parks or roads or all of these different things, obviously that's all important. Obviously, I'm not a politician, but the first thing that has to change is how we talk about our place. How do you talk about your hometown? I love Bourbon. It's the best place to be from. It gave so much to me, taught so much to me. My career has brought me to Indianapolis, and that's my home now. But how do you talk about your place, and how do leaders around the state change the dialogue of their hometown? Not just, blah, 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 this, that. It's like you have to talk about your place with reverence and pride. If you know people there are specific pockets of the state of Indiana that are so proud to be from there. If you don't know anything about southeastern Indiana, like the Batesville, the Lawrenceburg, like you meet someone from there and they are so proud. They might not live there anymore, but they're so proud to have grown up there and they talk about it with reverence. So that's the first thing. How are you changing the dialogue for your community into one that makes people proud to be from there, even if they don't still live there, but they can't wait to get back. They can't wait to come for the festival or the this or the that. That's the first one. The second part I think that is missing is these opportunities to plug your young people in so that they feel ownership in a community. Some of the best places I've seen, Wabash, Indiana is doing a spectacular job about this. Have you heard of the Wabash Fellowship that they have?
Yes.
Where they're bringing college kids into Wabash, Indiana to spend the summer working at local businesses and getting a seat at the table. Like, that's a piece that is just so incredible, where instead of having to wait 60 years until, the local whoever retires and like finally hangs it up, how do you get your young people plugged in? Brownstown, Jackson County is doing an incredible job. A few years back, they had a local resident kind of get together with a few younger people, like let's say in their late 20s, early 30s. They wanted to host an insane music festival. And they just started building, and like different legacy members of the community helped out, and like actually, like, they didn't do all the work for them, but they didn't make it hard and they didn't nix their ideas from the jump. They supported them, and now there's a really cool country music festival that has 4,500 attendees in a town of 3,000 people in Brownstown, Indiana, all because young people got a seat at the table, and the more seasoned parts of the community helped out and did their part to come together to build something special.
And I think, Nate, it all gets down, in my view, to leadership in a community, because those places that have the leadership, you mentioned the initiative in Wabash, perfect example. You would think that's something that's happening in Indianapolis or Fort Wayne or Evansville. No, it's Wabash, Indiana. And why not? Why not Wabash, Indiana? And they're capitalizing on it. And that leadership piece is, I think, what's really going to drive Indiana going forward.
Yeah, I think it's hanging up the ego, right? It's like, even if it's not your idea, how do you just commit to whatever the thing is? Too much of it is like, well, that wasn't my idea, so I'm not going to wholeheartedly support it. Like, call a good idea, and everyone row in the right direction to try to make cool things happen. That's where the magic really happens. Because I think that getting through the generational barrier of, well, Gen Z is this and Gen X is that and millennials and boomers are blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey, we all want the same thing. We all want the best version of our communities. We all want the best version of Indiana. How are you messaging that, telling the story? And you never know. Like, you want to get young people involved with your community, you should probably talk to the young people and see what they like and what they want to do.
Do you see your podcast as playing a role, an important role in helping to do that?
I think at times, yeah. I try to bring on people from all walks of life and schools of thought and different ages. And I'm a pretty laid back, casual individual. So I bring them in here, we sit down and we have a pretty fun and candid conversation. And at times it can be enlightening for people, right? If you're a leader that, hasn't spent a lot of time with young entrepreneurs, or if you're a young person that hasn't spent a lot of time with legacy business owners, helping break down those walls. And I talk a lot like plain English, like you're not going to get a lot of $5 words out of me, but we get to sit here, we get to laugh and joke, and you get to meet the people behind the brands and the communities. I think that's the piece. It's an hour, sometimes an hour and 15, 30 minutes. You can't have PR bullet points in that long of a conversation. Yeah. You might get through those, but at some point we're going to have to sit here and we're going to have to learn about who you are, what you care about. Are you a Bears fan? Are you a Colts fan? What do you think of the Pacers? You have the sports talk. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Who was your high school girlfriend? We don't get into that, but it's, I don't know. I'm humbled and honored, and it seems like it's really caught on and people love it. And I'm excited to just keep our foot on the gas, and I don't know, who knows what comes next.
I'd be interested in your perspective, Nate, on small town Indiana. Coming from a small town, I came from a small town, Clinton, Indiana, Vermilion County population. Well, now I think it's around 6,000. So small town Indiana, would not trade it for anything in terms of an experience growing up. Awesome. But as I look at many small towns in the state, they're challenged and the path forward is difficult. What do you see as the future for small town Indiana? You get around the state and talk to folks in again, every corner of the state. What do you see as the future for small town Indiana?
I think the best small towns are leaning into an identity, whatever that might be, right? So if you think of, I keep using this example, Jasper.
Yeah.
You think like the German heritage, right? It's like, this is a German entrepreneurial town. They have the Schnitzelbank. That's not like they were like full blown, everything is all German, but like that's kind of the identity there. They really lean into that. You look at other places. I was just up in Decatur, Indiana, and they have really leaned into the architecture and the art, the public art spaces and the buildings there. They actually have QR codes on a lot of their historic buildings that you can scan and take yourself on a walking tour to learn about the history of your place and where you're from. Wherever you might be, if you really want to build, in my opinion, a really strong small town, is find the identity and lean into that. You hear about Tell City being an awesome river city, and they just have leaned all the way into that. And those are the small towns I think that are the most appealing to people and the ones that are doing their best at mitigating population loss, maybe having some population gain, and telling those stories, right? Like, I think the one thing I love about small towns in Indiana is 95% of them, during specific months, November's coming up, Veterans Day, they have their local heroes from their communities up on the flagpoles, and it's incredible. But me, like as someone who asks questions, it's like I see the names and the dates of a lot of these people that have fought for our country, but what's their story? Like, how do I find out, how do we lean into that heritage and learn about those people and who's telling those stories? They're probably in an archive in the library somewhere, that need to be dusted off and digitized so people can learn about them. Like, it's the communities that are doing that don't just have plaques. Like, I've fully become, I'll be 30 next year, and I've made my full conversion. I'm a plaque reader. I stop. It is annoying. People will be out walking with me, and if I see a plaque, I have to stop and read the whole thing. And I'm just like, did you? And I usually pull it up at dinner later. It's like, did you know that blah blah blah? And they're like, you just read that outside, you silly guy. But how are we taking those plaques? How are we taking the legacy that is Indiana, that is your small town community, and telling those stories? Because that's what I think is the missing piece of small town Indiana. Is like today you look at it, and if you aren't telling stories in your small town, then it is just a dive bar. It is just a pizza place. It is just a stoplight and a gas station. It's the legacy behind that really makes people proud to be from there. They're like, people have walked here for generations before me, and generations after me, they're going to keep walking here. And this is what it means to walk the streets of this city.
Yeah. Wrap up with the V question here, the vision question, Nate. What you look 5-10 years down the road, what do you hope you have built with the Get In podcast?
I hope that we've built something that's inspiring to Hoosiers, and honestly, maybe in the long run, like inspiring to people wherever you might be. Like, inspires people to believe that their place where they are at can be better, and to work there towards making it better. I'm just so driven by impact, and we have the opportunity to make an impact. And so often I feel like people are are running to some other geography or running to some other zip code, thinking that happiness lies somewhere over the rainbow on that side of things. And I think the true magic comes from when you dig in, you start to make your area better, you grow where you're planted, and hopefully we impact, Hoosiers everywhere to just walk around with a sense of pride, knowing that this place is special. Is it perfect? No. But the only way it's ever going to get closer is if you dig in your heels and work to make it better. So, yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Well, Nate, it's been a real treat to catch up with you. Big fan of your work. The Get In podcast really is special for the state of Indiana. If anyone wants to get really a kind of a bird's eye view of what's happening in the state, the Get In podcast is certainly a must listen. So thanks for all you do for the state of Indiana. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you. And I have to say before I go, so often I'm out there and they're like, oh, so you're like inside Indiana business. Like people make the comparison. You have done such a spectacular job for many, many years telling the stories of Hoosiers all across the state. And it's been awesome to finally get to come on and chat with you and keep up the great work. It's inspiring and it has helped us a lot with where we are today.
Awesome. Hey, thanks very much for the kind words, Nate. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast. We are a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dipp. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.